The following episode features conversation with a practicing entertainment lawyer. It should not be confused for legal advice, as all situations are unique. Hey everyone, it's Cameron here from Framework, the last podcast about film, episode 9. It's a special episode, a bonus episode featuring a special guest. Her name's Olivia. She's the host of the Canadian Made, the podcast, as well as an entertainment lawyer in Toronto, Ontario. And today we're going to talk about the legal and business side of the film and television industry. So stay tuned and I hope you enjoy. So it was just a mess of paperwork, and it's a lot of paper, right? Like
that's the secret of producing. It's not glamorous. It's just paperwork.
It's just paper. Yeah. Yeah. And every production that I've done, mostly short independent stuff since graduating school in 2019. And every production gets a little bit bigger and every production gets a bit more paperwork, so it's a good ease of the way into hopefully maybe slightly different work in the future, but hopefully something similar and more regular and more paperwork and bigger as I go on. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's congratulations to you, because to have graduated in 2019, just on the edge of the pandemic, and be, getting gigs that I would consider to be good gigs, starting out, you're on the right path. So,
it's good to hear that too. Thank you. Thank you. It's really nice to hear that because, in the middle of a global catastrophe, I struggled getting jobs and interviews, and I think most people did. And I applied to masters earlier than I wanted to because of COVID, and then didn't get in. So it's just then your stress level goes up and you wonder if you're in the right field of work.
Yeah. You know what? I was actually reflecting on this in my own journey this morning, and it is such a tough time to be in your young 20s and worried about where you're getting your next paycheck from.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no clear prescribed path towards success in this industry. So it's really sometimes feels like it's hard to jump onto the, treadmill of the industry, if you will. And so, yeah, I'm super, super sympathetic to what you're going through, and, good for you for keeping at it, because it sounds like it's working out.
Yeah. And I mean, and we'll see what the future holds, really. And I've done so many different jobs, and you just kind of land in something, and I think something will take off eventually. And podcasting was an easy way to pivot too, because in the beginning of COVID and even now too, there's always I was one of the projects we just did, I got COVID, so I couldn't go on set, so it's still happening. Your projects are still being affected by COVID. And at the beginning of the pandemic, nobody knew what the heck was going on, and podcasting was an easy way, I'm sure you found this, to do things virtually and maintain quality and consistency. And it's relatively cheap to put on a podcast too. You can spend a lot of money on it if you choose to, but you don't have to.
I completely agree. There's no barrier to entry, really. Yeah. And it's a great way to connect with people in a virtual setting too. And I still continue to do all my podcasts virtually, though I am flirting with the idea of some in-person ones, something.
What about you though? What's your background? Where do you come from?
So the SparkNotes version is that I went to drama school in England, and, the 18-year-old version of myself had aspiring dreams to be an actress. And I was broken down, as many people are, by drama school. And I kind of graduated with the sense that I wanted to do something behind the scenes. I've always kind of been drawn to the film and TV industry, and it has always kind of sparked something inside of me. So I knew I was in the right industry, just kind of doing the wrong thing. So I worked for Stephanie Gorn, who you may know is a really prominent casting director in Toronto. And I loved working with her, and I loved being behind the scenes. And at that point, I was kind of stuck about what to do next and how to progress my career, because although I loved working in casting, it's a long slog of being kind of at the bottom of the barrel until you're a casting associate or casting director, and I wasn't really prepared to go on that journey. So I was looking for options of like what else to do, and I had some friends at the time who were in law school. And this was, I mean, when I was first started thinking about law school, there was a lot of pay equity stuff in Hollywood, and there was some prominent entertainment lawyers like speaking out about it. And I thought, okay, like that's a really interesting career path that has, this nice structure to it, which was very enticing to me. And so I decided to go to law school, with the dream of becoming an entertainment lawyer. And I was extremely fortunate that it happened really quick for me, that I got an entertainment law job right out, basically. And that's what I've been up to. So I love it. It's like a more unconventional path, I think, to be a part of the industry. Most people just work their way up from being a PA, but I do love it, and I'm really happy with where I am.
Yeah, I mean, and congratulations finding yourself in where you are now, and in what feels like fairly quickly. I mean, you made that change. You talk about having those dreams at 18, and I think those dreams are very common for a lot of people. I mean,
Yeah.
A friend of mine, well, no, he's not really a friend anymore, an acquaintance of mine, I would say. I worked with him once. He said when he went to college, the professor in the first class said, "Put your hand up if you want to be a director." And 98% of people put their hands up. And then in the same class, but 4 years later, he asked the same question and 2 people put their hand up.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so everybody came into college with and this happened at Sheridan too, maybe not that drastically, but, everybody comes into college with some sort of dream in their head. I mean, I wanted to be a director, and then totally changed in second year, at the end of second year. I had a friend of mine who I still work with who came in wanting to, either do directing or cinematography. And he took maybe 2 directing classes, and he realized, I definitely don't want to be a director. So he's not doing that. So I think it's a dream that we have for quite some time. I mean, I wanted to be a director for a long period of time. And then it didn't take very long to switch that off and move on to something else. It's interesting how that works.
So what's the dream now?
Yeah, so it's changed a little bit, but in September I'll be going back to school to do my master's in script writing and story design. So I want to be a writer. But more specifically, I would probably, I foresee myself also near mid or closer to the end of my career teaching. I feel like I have a knack for teaching, but I don't want to do that without having real world experience. And I want to teach in post-secondary, not in high school. So I'm going to get some experience first, and I've chosen hopefully the realm of like writing and producing. And the world of indie is really hectic. I would like to, try something. Well, I mean, I'm sure the world of commercial production is really hectic too. But I would like to, like I was saying earlier, as I get into doing more projects, every project sort of change in scope, even if a little bit slightly. So you want to feel like you're working up. And I wouldn't shy away from, working in development, even if it was, from the perspective of a company like Entertainment One or what's that? What's the other one? My gosh, I'm blanking.
Chorus?
Chorus or anyone. There's, oh my gosh, I interviewed at one. Well, anyways, it'll come to me in the middle of a statement. But sort of development executive type roles where maybe you're not penning the story necessarily, but I like the idea of dealing with multiple projects and also having I don't love office environments, but I don't love not being with people either. Like I don't like home, like work from home 24/7 either. So it would have to be some sort of mixed sort of job that brings you to multiple places. And So I feel like I couldn't write for the rest of my life, although I love writing. But partnerships like co-writing or working on projects as a producer, as a creative, even, and I like producing because I like bringing teams together and orienting those teams towards a goal, and but I also can switch that part of my brain off and just work with the writer and work with the director to make creative decisions. So it's sort of combining that business sense that I think I have, the entrepreneurial sense that I think I have, and also the creative sense that I know that I have as well. So we'll see.
Totally. All options are on the table, it sounds like.
Yeah. Have you ever seen yourself, or have you ever wanted to sort of be at the helm producing a project?
Oh, totally. Like I am a type A control freak, and I love that. It is one of the things I love most about my job now is the producers that come, or like that are recurring clients, and we're on the project from the get-go. And so we've been involved from the stage of optioning to post-production. I love those types of projects because you know what's happening, and you know the ins and outs, and you understand the nuances of everything, and so you can kind of help the producers problem solve and sort stuff out, and you become much more of a producer in those instances than just purely legal. And those are my favorite types of projects. So although I love my job and I have no plans of leaving, I could totally see myself working as producer down the road, because like you, as a like working in legal, you get the eagle eye on everything. I understand how all the parts fit together. I understand how everything happens. Like there's, especially when our bigger clients, like not a lot happens that we don't look over. So I've seen a lot. And so I think maybe in 5 years, I could be called to produce, but we shall see. We shall see.
We'll see. And hopefully it does happen. I would be nice. It would be nice to do it myself as well. Like just feel like I have to, prepare myself for it, because it's almost required that you do have that type A personality.
100%.
If you're at the very helm of it. But I also find that, at least in what I've read and people I've talked to, and producers come from multiple backgrounds. There are so many producers that come from business backgrounds and legal backgrounds, and
well, there's different types of producers that you need on a project, right?
Yes,
there are creative producers, there are business producers, there are financing producers. Like there's a lot of different nuances about what it means to be a producer. But I mean, ultimately, you have to have someone who's like on the business legal side handling that stuff, because that stuff is absolutely essential. And so there is that person that you need to be just like a total type A person. Now, like producing, or sorry, creative producers don't necessarily have to be that same type personality. They, I think, can be a little bit more in the weeds in the creative side. So I'm definitely coming at it from a different angle, but I think there's a lot of different personality types and a lot of different backgrounds that would absolutely thrive to be a producer, and given the right situation
and in suitable areas of like, I think I've said this before, and I talk about this to my family as well. Like it's kind of funny, actually. No matter what you go to school for, if you orient yourself towards the film industry, there's a home for you. Like, for example, my sister went to school for international development at Waterloo. So she's big on sustainability. And Netflix and I know Netflix is doing it. I'm pretty sure Amazon's doing it. I've heard Netflix is now hiring somebody to, on their bigger shows, to manage the water. And that's a very sustainability driven thing, right? They're trying to reduce plastic. And I know somebody who's worked on a show in the water truck, and So if you are passionate about plastic water bottles and getting rid of them, and you went to school for sustainability and you're interested in the film industry, there's a home for you somewhere. And so
Totally.
people come from everywhere. And on this film in November, I found that the producer was very creative, but he also had, it's a smaller project, like, obviously, big budget in my eyes, but it comes with its own restrictions and constraints and things like that. So everything's sort of dumped on him, and he did have a partner helping him out. But he was very stressed. But he came more from the creative side because he did write the script. So he wants to oversee the creative with the director as well. So, but it's a lot of work to do two roles where both of those roles, where you have to turn off your creative brain and deal with a mountain of paperwork, and then the next day turn the creative brain back on, and it could be very exhausting.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a slog.
Yeah. I want to go back to one thing you kind of alluded to a little bit, which is being involved in a project at various stages, from optioning to, to the final credits. Do you ever, like, tell me a little bit about that, and when do you normally get involved, and does it vary, and does it vary, for example, with the size of the budget?
Yes, it definitely varies based on the size of the budget. Generally, projects with a healthy budget will be involved every stage of the production, because they can kind of afford to take us on. Now, with that being said, I would encourage you, if you're a producer, to reach out really at any stage, because even if you don't necessarily have the biggest budgets, first of all, there may be something that we can do to help kind of work it out. But also, we may be able to point you into the right direction of things to think about, and things to remember, so that you don't fall into pitholes that are a lot harder to clean up afterwards. So what I mean by that is, if you are optioning any kind of property, you really want to make sure that the agreement is comprehensive and coherent. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that it makes sense. And so, sometimes it's worthwhile I would actually say all the time, it's worthwhile to go to a lawyer and just say, can I have a draft option agreement? I understand that, it may be different in different circumstances and it may need adapting. And, I'm okay with taking that on, but I just really need a strong, solid base so that I'm making sure that I'm getting the proper assignment of rights, whatever it may be. So that would be if you have literally no budget and you're in the business, you're trying to get into the business, then that would be a great opportunity to reach out. And then you just know that you have a clean chain of title moving forward. Obviously, to the extent that I can totally take on the option, draft it, negotiate it, deal with everything like that, obviously that's ideal, because sometimes people, if it's a person with a lot more clout, they're going to have a lot more to say about the option that you give them, right? And so, dealing with those contractual nuances is important. So I hope that answers your question in terms of getting involved at the early stages. But oftentimes people don't need options, right? They're just doing their own project, and then they come to us when they need to get bound with insurance. So literally the project's done, everything's been squared away, and they come to us and they say, we need you to approve this for E&O. We have to get this bound, and then we have to go, okay, whoa, we have to backtrack. We have to make sure all the right agreements are in place, and then obviously review the film for any issues. So, really people come to us at any stage, maybe just for one agreement, maybe for the whole film. It totally depends. And it depends on your budget. It depends on a lot of things, to be honest, but you can come to us at any point.
Yeah. And I think, I asked, Front Row Insurance, when I had the conversation with them, a similar question, and it was the same. It's always the same answer, right? It's encouraged to reach out early, and I'll say from experience as a younger person who's out of school 3-4 years, still working on projects, that are the budget's amounting to, like, let's say under $15,000 or $20,000, there is this immediate hesitation to go, okay, well, I should probably talk to a lawyer about these things. And these are projects where, there's one producer who either wrote it, or there's one producer who didn't write it, and there's a director who wrote it, and it's a small team of probably less than 20 people total. And there's no company. You're doing it as a sole proprietor, or you're doing it as a partnership. There might be a partnership agreement involved that you just drafted yourself, and there's this hesitation. It's like, oh, well, my mom works with lawyers. Lawyers are expensive, so I don't want to spend that if I want the money to end up on screen, and you're just hesitant because you don't have a lot of money to work with to begin with, and you don't know what the conversation is going to be like, and what the cost is going to be like, and so it is good to know, and it's good to reassure the audience of our podcast as well that, because they're normally younger. They're supposed to be younger. If we're doing our job right, they're younger. To just go out and reach out. So it's good to remind them of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no harm in just giving us a call, and we can hopefully get you on the right path if you have concerns. And there are a lot of actually resources available for young and like producers with just no budget from the various guilds. There are sample agreements online that you can find. I can't speak to how good they are. I haven't thoroughly vetted them, but there are resources available if you, look high and low.
Yeah. Also. And this is a question that I have a friend from high school who's studying to become a lawyer, and she's studying. First of all, she's studying in America, and the law's a little bit different over there, so that there's differences. But we have discussions about contracts and things like that. And for example, a simple one that I do, and I just do it up myself based on a draft of something that I had from school, is a crew agreement. So something simple like a deal memo that is signed to commit. The last production we did, we actually had some people who were volunteers and some people who were not. And the ones who were not, I hadn't done something like that before. So I actually had to amend the agreement to actually include payment. And in the version that I had before, it was the same one. I just had to add wording. And the question that I think I have, and some younger producers have, is you don't have any. I don't have any legal training. If there's a problem that arises, could that agreement even hold up? And without talking to a lawyer, how would you know that? And can you even write your own agreements? Like, I don't understand how that even works. Like, it's sort of funny, but
Yes. Okay. So the short answer is yes. That contract will likely be enforceable. I mean, to the extent that everyone's signing it under sound mind and there's no duress or anything like that. Right. Yeah, the contract will hold up. The one thing to be aware of is that generally if you've drafted the contract, any, interpretation of the contract or any, where there is vague language or something is unclear, it's going to be, on its face interpreted against you.
Yep.
So it's something to be aware of. But yeah, that's a contract is a contract. And that's that. Really, that's the long and the short of it. You don't have to be a lawyer to write a valid contract.
I wanted to hear it from a lawyer, but I think a lot of us just operate under that assumption, and it's good to just get it is good to get it properly written, though, because that could get you in trouble, right? I mean, that interpretation could be not great for you. So
Well, here's the thing. To be honest, what we see in contracts that we get that are clearly not from lawyers or, badly drafted, not to,
Yeah.
make anyone feel bad, isn't necessarily that it's vague, but just more often than not, there's a lot of things missing from it that really need to be in there, especially with, film contracts, production contracts. Like there's certain language that you really have to see in every agreement
Hmm.
that is on a lot more often, which a lot of times is missing.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how many times that we see it's missing. So, things like making sure that there's always an assignment of rights, no matter what your contribution is on the film, it needs to be made clear in every single agreement who owns the copyright to the work that you're making.
Hmm.
That's a really, really good example of one. Because that's often missing, and if you haven't clearly defined who the copyright holder is as the producer or whoever it is, the prodco, if you have a single purpose vehicle, then that's the problem.
Yeah.
For a lot of different reasons. You also always want to make sure that you have a waiver of injunctive relief, so that people can't come and stop the distribution of your film, because ultimately, if they do, that's going to cause a problem for you on, like, obviously, because you can't get your film out there. But if they have a claim against you, you can't make any money from the film. And so ultimately it's just going to it's going to create a bigger problem. Another one we like to see is indemnity. We always like to see indemnity language in there. A waiver of moral rights is another important one. There's a lot of important things, but those are just the highlights.
I definitely familiar with some of the language because I from college we had a producing course and we talked about a lot of those terms and some of that language. So I'm familiar with some of that language. I don't know the ins and outs of everything, but I've also seen some contracts, real world contracts with some of the same language. It in terms of that copyright and ownership and chain of title and having that being clean, I guess. I took a producer essentials course online. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a course online, and they did a full module on a clean chain of title, and it was there's a lot of information, and a lot of the times at the level that I'm producing at, the writer is the director, and the writer director is making all of the creative decisions for him or herself, and the producer is brought on board by that person to do the paperwork, essentially to manage the production so that they don't have to think about those kinds of situations. And a lot of the times at this level, unless you're getting a grant or you're getting some sort of grant financing or financing from another source, you're paying for it yourself. In a situation where the producer's brought on by the person who wrote the script and the person who's making the creative decisions, and then the movie goes through the process of paying people and getting made and what have you. In that sort of a situation where you don't have a big arrangement, the writer director's either operating as an individual or with their own company. How clear cut is it? Who owns it in that sort of a situation? Does it just land with as a default, unless pending any sort of agreements as a default? Is it as easy as saying that the writer and the director, they own it because they wrote it?
I don't believe so. Now, I don't think that this has been actually tested in Canadian courts, but what my understanding is that if there is no clear paperwork outlining who owns the copyright, the assumption is that the director owns the copyright to the film, and the director will ultimately be the owner of the film.
Okay.
And so, like I said, this is not, I don't think that this is as clear cut as to say that, but I certainly would never want to find myself in a situation where I was having to do that kind of analysis. It really should always be laid out extremely clearly in paperwork, and it doesn't need to be complicated, but everyone needs to sit around a table and decide who's going to own the copyright in the production, whatever it may be. All the key players need to have that conversation, and it needs to be made clear, because if the producer wants to own the copyright and it's not clearly laid out, that's going to be a problem.
And I have seen examples on, I won't go into too many specifics, but for various reasons, but I have seen examples that could severely complicate the issue, I would imagine, because there has been an instance in a project that I was on where a producer came on board and was involved in, partially in the development of the project, paid for the production but didn't direct it, didn't write it. The director claims that in a conversation, so verbal because we can't find any text messages, that money that was spent by the producer for the writer and director's production was grant money. That's it. And then the production was made and there's still no contracts. And so the fact that the person who wrote the script did not pay 100% of the financing probably complicates it when you have another body who's come on paper. Well, I say on paper just as a statement of phrase, but comes on paper as a producer, does that work, makes the production under their company, it was an incorporation, and pays for the production. And the only contract, and I did that under quotes because it was verbal, was that the money I'm giving you is a grant. And there's not much evidence that they had that conversation. So this is a complicated situation, I would imagine, because if you're directing a film and I'm saying, I'll give you $10,000 to make your film, and that's all we say, and you make it, and we don't enter into a paper contract. Later down the line, I could just say, well, I paid for it, so I own it.
I mean, I don't think that you can say that.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, that would be a very, very complicated analysis. That would be very fact specific. And so I don't want to, try to get too much in the weeds of that particular scenario. But like I said, I believe that the assumption is that the director is the copyright holder. And, the whole idea of work for hire, for example, which you may be familiar with, is not a given just because you pay someone to do something. There has to be a clear there has to be a contract that clearly lays out that it's a work for hire engagement. The law doesn't support assumptions about people waiving their copyright entitlements or assigning their copyright entitlements. To the extent that anybody is assigning or waiving, there has to be a contract that clearly states that. It's probably not even going to be enough that someone said it, to be honest with you. So, I would be incredibly weary of giving someone money without a contract. To be honest with you, I don't think that that's ever advisable, because you don't have any rights after that. Because then if there's no evidence that there was, it was a loan or a grant or anything like that, well, it's you don't want to take that risk.
Yeah.
And so, I
was very surprised that the director and producer went forward without putting anything on paper.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's not the most well-written contract, you have to write something down, because there has to be a meeting of minds, like everybody has to get on the same page, and everyone's being, I think, a little bit short-sighted to just do things like that on a handshake deal. Would be my opinion, but I obviously don't know the facts of that scenario, intimately.
When it comes to starting a company, there's the main thing that's on my mind about that, I think, is at least in the industry, it's standard to set up single purpose companies. And I've seen this happen. I worked at a Chesler Perlmutter in Toronto for 5 months as a placement. And the executive in charge of, was it finance? I think it was finance. And he was just explaining to me the process of setting up single purpose companies. And the main thing that's on my mind about that is a lot of people also have their own sort of what they call the production company, which is the brand that they operate under. But that company then just, I guess, own the single purpose company. And when the film is completed, that single purpose company dissolves and then the rights go to the parent company. How does all that kind of happen and work paperwork wise and legally wise and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So single purpose companies are useful mostly for tax credit purposes because they keep everything really cleanly together, basically. So, we don't have finances being, let's call the bigger company, the umbrella company, being wrapped up with the single purpose company. So it helps keep everything on the straight and narrow, basically. So, if you're getting tax credits, it's extremely advisable that you do incorporate a single purpose company because it will just make your life way easier. There is a cost associated with, incorporating. At the firm, I'm actually not sure exactly what the cost is. I know our firm charges $1,100 per incorporation. So it gives you an idea, which is basically just disbursements plus a fee. So it's, the actual cost of incorporation is somewhere around there. I don't even want to speculate what it is. I just know what our firm charges to incorporate. And it's a very straightforward process. To be honest, I don't personally undertake it, but I know that it's very straightforward. Our office manager, Molly, who is incredibly lovely, handles all our incorporations at the office. Shout out to Molly. And so that actually, the process of incorporating is extremely straightforward. It's just a case of the decision should be based on, a couple of things. Do you have the finances to incorporate? If you're super, super small budget, that could be a factor. Are you getting tax credits? And are you ready to take on the obligations associated with having a corporation, right? Because there are certain tax implications. There are things you need to be aware of. And if, you're not going to be earning that much money through an incorporation, it may not be worth it. And so you have to think about all those things. But generally, yes. So if we have a company that's broadly known, let's call them, I don't know what company, I don't want to shout anybody out and put anybody on the spot, but let's call them like Framework, right? Sure. If you're a big producer, you're wheeling and dealing. On each production that you do, you're going to have a single purpose vehicle, and you're going to be either you and your partners are going to be the shareholders of those single purpose companies. And so a lot of times it might not necessarily be worth it to incorporate those single purpose companies right when you are optioning productions, because you might have, tax implications for a couple of years before that, piece of property actually goes into production. And so so it's just something to think about from a practical perspective. Framework actually might be the person or the entity that's optioning a lot of things, and there might be a lot of development happening through Framework. And then what happens is that you just assign those rights to whichever, single purpose entity that you have then incorporated for that production. So assigning agreements is really never a problem. It's a super, super straightforward thing, especially when you're doing it between friendly parties. And then that company exists. They generally, all of the contracts under that production are handled through that entity. And then, tax credits take a certain amount of time to go through after the project's done because of a number of administrative reasons. So you generally want to hold on to that you generally want to hold on to that single purpose vehicle for at least 2 years post the end of your production, at which point you kind of have two options. Either you can dissolve it and assign all the rights back to Framework, as it were, or you can actually just amalgamate it in to framework so that it just kind of gets absorbed by
Right.
the bigger umbrella company. So you have some options. Yeah, some really in the weeds stuff here, but it's actually relatively straightforward. You just kind of have to know what's happening.
Right. And it like you said, for it's cleaner for tax purposes and for accounting too, because I imagine, if you have a single purpose company that opens a bank account and you have money coming in and out of that bank account, if you were to put those transactions and mix them up into the bank account for the parent company, it would look like there are various expenditures that don't seem to fit what you're doing, perhaps, and
Yeah, exactly.
like
It will
it's just
get super
cleaner. Yeah.
complicated super fast. And I mean, to the extent that you're opening up a bank account solely for the purpose of your project entity,
Yeah.
then in theory, or I guess in practice too, 100% of the budget gets deposited into that account and
Yeah.
spent through that
And
account.
spent through the account. Yeah.
It's easier.
Yeah.
From an accounting purpose, it's, I mean, way easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, most of the productions that I'm working on as the producer are smaller productions, under 15,000, where the producer is unincorporated. And this last production that I was on was one where I was producing, but the director and the director's family was financing it. So I was helping her manage the finances and pay people and keep records of everything and keep receipts and keep invoices and do contracts and things like that. I was helping her with keeping that relatively organized. It just, it confuses me when there isn't like a single purpose body taking care of that stuff. But I guess when you are unincorporated is less important. I mean, sorry, when you're unincorporated and you're not applying for tax credits, and there's not a lot of money going in and out, and there's not a lot of money coming in from various locations, it's a little less confusing. So it's a total valid way of producing your projects.
Totally. And I mean, to the extent that you are an individual who is owning the copyright and you don't have a corporation or a specific corporation for that company, you can still open up a bank account, that's expressly for that purpose of production. And, maybe it's connected to your main bank account, but you just have all of your finances flowing through one thing so that on your statement, it just makes sense. Then, there's ways around it. But I mean, on a smaller budget like that, you may not need to really be accountable to anybody in the same way as you are with tax credits too, right? So there might not need to be that same strictness about how you account. But with that being said, with grant monies, there are certain restrictions oftentimes,
Right.
even on a smaller scale. So it's a good thing to get into the habit of, like, being extremely meticulous as you start out. It'll serve you well.
Yeah, I as I've done more projects, I just keep keeping better records every time. I just feel like it's just important to know, especially when you're paying somebody, when you receive the invoice, filing it away and always keeping those records and
100%.
Yeah,
It's
I'm keeping it.
and it's like you live and learn too, right?
Yeah,
With
for sure.
this
Yeah.
industry, it's like every project that you work on, you have new challenges, you encounter new things, and you can kind of just grow and get better at every single turn. I know that's how I feel. I feel like if I looked at what I was doing a year ago, I would probably just cringe. It's
Yeah.
like you're constantly improving and you're
Yeah, for
constantly
sure.
getting better.
Yeah. And even at the unincorporated level, small budget level, it's not hard to open a bank account. And you don't have to, I bank with Simply Financial, and you don't have to deposit a lot of money to have that bank account. you don't have to keep a lot of money. So even if you wanted to just open a bank account that's separate from your personal finances, if you do a lot of projects on a yearly basis, and you wanted to open a bank account for money in, money out, to just put things, money aside for your own projects, it's not hard to manage a second bank account, and there wouldn't be a lot of money going into it anyways. And if it's just for you and just for practice too, if you wanted to practice, I guess, at a smaller level. But yeah, no, we shot for 2 days, so it's not, and that's when really all the money is. At this level, really all the money is spent, because nobody was paid for prep. Everyone was just paid for the 2 days that they spent, because we didn't have enough money to pay everybody for prep. So almost all the money, I would say 90% of the money is spent in production anyways at this level. You spent maybe $1,500 on insurance at the beginning, and then the rest of it during production, and then we're working for free in post-production too. So, you maybe buy a couple of hard drives and spend money on festivals, and that's so most of the money is spent in production anyway. So after 2 days, it's all out of your account, and the rest is the fun stuff. So it's almost not, like you said, it's almost not worth it. Like if you're going to spend $1,500 incorporating or $1,100 incorporating, it's almost not worth it, because there goes 15 to 20% of your budget anyways.
Yeah, it just depends, right? You have to be tactical as much as you obviously always want to be conscientious. And I think, if I would say I am surprised that I don't get calls from people more often, just asking really general questions about how to get things going and where to find things. And to be honest, what most of our big clients do for reference is at the beginning of every project, we send them what's called a start set. And it basically just has a whole bunch of agreements that they will need in the process of production. So they're not coming to us for every single crew deal or every single, release. Mm-hmm. They have the tools to be able to basically manipulate the contracts, to put in, if they're contracting for a location agreement, they just have to put in the location agreement, details of the contracting person, right? So it makes it a lot more straightforward for them. And, for me, it's like between an hour and a half, 2 hours of work, which is a lot cheaper than me having actually drafted all those contracts for them, right, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they come back to us when people have comments, when there's something weird about a particular deal. Product placement deals are notoriously wonky and need some negotiating and ironing out. And then obviously, all the other contracts like the actor agreements, the director agreements, the writer agreements oftentimes need a little bit more massaging and negotiating based on the deal. But yeah, there's a lot of value that we can add without a huge price tag based on your needs, and just putting together like a start pack for you as a producer or you as a writer or director or whatever, so that you can go forth into each and every production feeling, confident that you have the right tools in your toolkit.
Well, I can tell you this, that I'll be doing that for everything going forward, even if it's small. And I'm happy to have this conversation and, make a new contact and talk to people, because it's been, pandemic was hard. I mean, we're still in it, but it was the virtual thing, like you said at the beginning of the episode. Maybe soon you'll flirt with, doing it in person, and it'd be nice to meet you in person.
Yes, it definitely would. And I think that, sometimes lawyers can feel so intimidating. And like you said, like there are lawyers in Toronto who've been working, for 40 years and are incredible wealths of knowledge. But then there are people like me and other people at my firm that are a little bit more like young and spry and passionate and cheaper. And so it's always, there are people out there at like, just in the way that you feel like you're starting out, and not sure who to turn to, like that's to some degree how I feel, you know what I mean? Like I'm still new in the industry and I'm still figuring things out. And so I'm always really excited to meet young producers who are, you know, have big dreams and are passionate about the industry, because, you know, my hope is always that we'll grow together, you know?
Yeah, and that's the big thing, growing together and learning from each other, and um, we we were on the same project and didn't even know it. So
Yeah.
so
I'm
I'm
curious if we
sure
were on emails and I didn't even realize. I'm going to look at these now.
I don't think so.
Oh, you don't think so? You
I
just saw
don't
my name
think
in the
so. I
credits.
think I
That's what
just
you
saw your
think.
name in the Excel spreadsheet. So for our audience, can you tell us what the company name is, where you work?
Oh, yeah, of course. So it's Goldenberg and Company
Yeah.
now, professional corporation. So you can our new well, we just changed our name,
Okay.
and we have a brand new website. So you can Google us, and my name is of course Olivia Danylchuk. So you can Google me, and I'll come up, and there's finally a picture of me on the website. So
Fantastic.
you'll know who I
Awesome.
am.
And how big is the company? Like, is it
So
employee?
there's three lawyers,
Three
and
lawyers. Okay.
there's one office manager, executive assistant, whatever she is. She has many titles, many roles. So Dan Goldenberg, he's the boss. He's the partner, the named partner, and then basically the two associates, Ben and I. And Ben has been around longer than I have, and they're both very wise. And Molly is kind of, like I said, she handles a lot of corporate things, as well as, you know, typical office manager stuff.
Yeah.
And she's the best. She brings the best energy, and the whole office, we're all quite relatively young for a law firm, and everyone's got a great personality, and it's really fun and really easy to talk to and super knowledgeable. So
Well,
yeah,
that's
I
the
think
fun
I
thing too. You wanna deal with a law firm. I feel like you really do. Like Steve, you might have saw in the episode at the beginning of the episode, Steve said we're not too far from car salesmen, and that, yeah, that's just a funny comment, but it's true. It's almost like, like insurance brokers are there and they're providing a service, and they're and that's, to the creative team, that we need it and we get it.
yeah.
And
I don't think that we see ourselves in the same way. I don't want to speak on behalf of the whole firm, but I think that we see ourselves as much more of like partners
yes,
in the
yeah,
production,
uh,
and we want to, you know, we want to have a
yeah,
relationship with you, and we want to be
exactly,
pals,
yeah,
as well as being, you know, like you know, uh really good advisors. We want to, you know, have a good
yeah,
relationship on a personal level, and I think with a lot of our, you know, repeat clients, we do, and
yeah.
I like to think that's why they come back.
And it would do us good to understand and know that, and he was joking about like the stigma, of course, about that
Yes, of
surrounds
course.
business and legal and insurance people in this
Yeah.
industry. So
We're
hopefully through
not
this,
normal lawyers, we're cool
yeah,
lawyers.
you're cool lawyers. Yeah, yeah. You can answer this really quickly because we'll wrap it up. But for a producer and their budget, a lot of the times the way that it's in school, the way that we were taught to budget for contingencies is through a percentage.
Okay.
Does When a producer budgets for legal, do they do it similarly? How do they get that number on the line? Would you suggest just talking to a law firm and saying, what is this going to cost me? Or should the producer do it in the inverse way of just saying, okay, well, it's about this and we'll just budget for that and see if we can fulfill that?
You know what? I would always ask the question, because the scope that you think that you need from us may be different than the reality,
Yeah.
in to your benefit and vice versa, right? And so probably best just to ask, because, you know, the quote might be lower than you're expecting, or it might be higher. And then, you know, to the extent that you come to us and you say, look, this is the budget, you know, we may be flexible in finding a way to help you too, right? So I think it's just best to have a conversation, and then we can deal with it on a case by case basis.
Fantastic. Yeah. And very simple, short answer, and that's the best way. And I look forward to meeting you in person. And
Same.
well, thank you for reaching out. And I'd love to keep my eye on Canadian made. And
well, thank you for saying that.
And I'll definitely reach out again for project related things as well. So
yes, don't hesitate to send me a note. I say that to all the time to people, and people rarely take me up on it. So
I will take you up on it. I don't know when the next project is, to be honest, because the master's is coming my way. But I have various younger producer colleagues, and I'd be happy to recommend your company as well. So.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. And I'm so pleased to have met you and gotten to talk to you. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for listening to Framework, the last podcast about film, episode 9. If you want to listen to Canadian Made, the podcast, you can check it out on Spotify. If you're listening on Spotify right now and you want to check out additional content, you can go to YouTube. If you want to be on the show or if you want to comment, you can send us an email at rcpodcasts@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, links in the description below. And I look forward to seeing you all again on episode 10 of Framework, the last podcast about film.